September 12, 1944. Peleliu, Palau Islands. 8:00 hours. Major Robert Cowboy Stout's F-6F Hellcat swept over the northern airfield at 8,000 feet. The automatic reconnaissance camera clicked steadily beneath the fuselage. His orders were simple: photograph the airfield and return to USS Hornet. Intelligence had assured him the field was abandoned, bomb damage from previous raids. Nothing to worry about. Then Stout looked down. The airfield below was packed with Japanese aircraft. Mitsubishi S-6M0s, Nakajima bombers, dozens of them lined wingtip to wingtip, fuel drums stacked in neat rows between the aircraft, ground crews swarming around each plane. They were not abandoned. They were preparing for a massive strike. Stout counted quickly. At least 40 aircraft, fully armed, fully fueled, all pointed at one target. He knew exactly what they were waiting for. In 3 days, 28,000 Marines would storm the beaches of Peleliu in one of the largest amphibious assaults of the Pacific War. The invasion fleet was already steaming toward the island. These 40 Japanese aircraft were positioned to massacre them before they reached shore. Stout's training was clear. Reconnaissance pilots observe and report. They do not engage, especially not alone against an entire airfield bristling with anti-aircraft guns. Radio the coordinates. Return to base. Let command decide how to respond. Let command decide how to respond. But Stout also understood military bureaucracy. By the time he landed, filed his report, and command assembled a strike package, hours would pass, maybe a full day. The Japanese would scatter these aircraft, hide them in revetments, or worse, launch them against the fleet. The Marines landing on those beaches in 3 days did not have time for proper procedure. They needed these planes destroyed now, not tomorrow. What happened next would save between 500 and 1,000 American lives. It would earn Stout the Navy Cross. And it would demonstrate a principle that military strategists still study today. Sometimes the most heroic thing a soldier can do is refuse to follow orders. Watch what happens when one pilot decides that 28,000 lives matter more than regulations. By September 1944, the Pacific War had reached its most brutal phase. American forces were island hopping toward Japan. Each landing met fanatical resistance. Japanese commanders had adopted a new strategy: make every island so costly that America would negotiate peace rather than invade the home islands. Peleliu was critical to this strategy. The island sat astride the southern approach to the Philippines. Its capture would provide airfields to support MacArthur's return. Japanese commanders understood this. They had transformed the 6-square-mile coral island into a fortress. Colonel Kunio Nakagawa commanded the 11,000-man garrison. Unlike previous Japanese commanders who had focused on beach defenses, Nakagawa had fortified the interior. The Umurbragol Ridges, a maze of coral caves and tunnels, became an underground fortress. He had stockpiled ammunition, food, and water for months of fighting. His men were prepared to die, but determined to kill as many Americans as possible first. Intelligence had underestimated Japanese strength on Peleliu. Aerial reconnaissance had identified some fortifications, but missed the extent of underground defenses. More critically, intelligence had failed to identify the concentration of aircraft on the northern airfield. The airfield at Peleliu had been bombed repeatedly in August and early September 1944. American planners believed it was unusable. Reconnaissance photos showed cratered runways and damaged structures. What they missed was Japanese activity at night. Ground crews had repaired key sections of runway. They had positioned aircraft in revetments hidden from aerial observation, and they had concentrated a strike force specifically to attack the invasion fleet. 40 aircraft might not seem like many compared to the massive carrier air groups supporting the invasion, but timing was everything. If those 40 aircraft launched during the vulnerable first hours of the amphibious assault, when Marines were packed in landing craft and transport ships, casualties would be catastrophic. Robert Stout understood this because he had seen it before. At 28 years old, he had already flown 63 combat missions. He had flown close air support at Tarawa in November 1943. He had watched Japanese planes wreak havoc on the first waves of Marines. He had seen bombers target crowded landing craft that could not maneuver or defend themselves. Tarawa haunted every Marine who survived it. The 1st Marine Division lost over 1,000 killed in 76 hours of fighting. Many died in the water before reaching shore. Air attacks had been devastating because the troops had no cover. They were trapped in boats, helpless. Stout knew the Peleliu assault would be similar. D-Day was set for September 15, 1944. The 1st Marine Division, veterans of Guadalcanal and Cape Gloucester, would lead the assault. They were tough, experienced. But no amount of toughness helped when enemy aircraft strafed landing craft. This was the context Stout considered as he circled above the airfield. His mission was reconnaissance. Take photos, report back, simple. But the mission assumed the enemy was not an immediate threat. The mission assumed time for proper channels. The mission assumed someone else would handle the tactical response. All of those assumptions were wrong. Stout circled higher. He studied the layout below. The Japanese had made a critical mistake in their haste. The aircraft were packed too close together, surrounded by exposed fuel drums. One good hit could start a chain reaction that would consume the entire field. He checked his armament. 650 caliber Browning M2 machine guns. 2,400 rounds total, roughly 12 seconds of sustained fire. Not nearly enough to destroy 40 aircraft individually, but enough to light a very big fuse. The F-6F Hellcat was not designed as a ground attack aircraft. It was a carrier-based fighter. Air-to-air combat was its specialty, but the Hellcat was tough. Grumman had built it to absorb punishment. Pilots called it the aluminum tank. If any single-engine fighter could survive attacking a heavily defended airfield alone, the Hellcat could. Stout was not a reckless pilot. He had survived 63 combat missions by being smart, aggressive when necessary, cautious when prudent. He knew the difference between courage and suicide. What he was considering now walked that line carefully. If he attacked, every anti-aircraft gun on Peleliu would target him. He would be alone. No wingmen to suppress ground fire. No one to cover his escape. His Hellcat could take damage. But one lucky shot to the engine or cockpit would send him into the jungle with no possibility of rescue. If he did not attack, those 40 aircraft would launch in waves against the invasion fleet. Japanese pilots would strafe the landing craft, bomb the transport ships, turn the beaches into killing zones. The Marines would die by the hundreds before establishing a beachhead. The decision took less than 30 seconds. Stout pushed the throttle forward and rolled the Hellcat into a dive. The altimeter unwound rapidly as he dropped toward the jungle canopy. His plan was simple: come in fast and low, hit the fuel drums first, get out before the anti-aircraft gunners could track him. At 2,000 feet, he leveled off and pushed the throttle to the firewall. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp engine roared at maximum power. The Hellcat accelerated to nearly 400 mph. Trees blurred beneath him as he dropped to barely 50 feet above the jungle. The airfield appeared suddenly through a gap in the trees. Japanese ground crews looked up in confusion as the Hellcat roared overhead. Some froze, others dove for cover. None reached their anti-aircraft positions in time. Stout lined up on the northern row of aircraft. His finger found the trigger. All 6 machine guns opened fire simultaneously. Their combined roar drowned out the engine. Tracers walked across the tarmac. 50 caliber rounds punched through the thin aluminum skin of a Zero. The fighter shuddered under the impacts. Fuel sprayed from ruptured tanks. Stout adjusted his aim slightly. He fired into a cluster of fuel drums stacked between 2 bombers. The drums disintegrated under 50 caliber fire. Aviation fuel exploded in a massive fireball that engulfed both aircraft. The explosion was bigger than Stout anticipated. Flames leapt 50 feet into the air. The blast wave rocked his Hellcat as he pulled up hard. Behind him, the fire spread with terrifying speed. The first burning Zero ignited the aircraft parked beside it. That fire spread to another. Then another. Each explosion fed the next. Within seconds, half the northern row was engulfed. Japanese ground crews ran in all directions. They abandoned any attempt to save the aircraft. Anti-aircraft gunners finally reached their positions and opened fire, but Stout was already climbing away, weaving to spoil their aim. Tracers arced past his canopy. He felt impacts shudder through the airframe as 20mm rounds punched through his tail section. Warning lights flickered on the instrument panel. He banked hard right, gaining altitude, circling back around. Below, the devastation exceeded his expectations. Nearly 20 aircraft were burning. The flames spread across the tarmac in a river of fire. Thick black smoke boiled into the sky, visible for miles. But on the southern end of the field, at least 20 more aircraft sat untouched. Stout checked his ammunition, half gone, maybe 6 seconds of firing time left. The anti-aircraft gunners were ready now. Tracking him as he circled, coming back for a second pass was asking to be shot down. He rolled inverted and dove anyway. This time the anti-aircraft fire was immediate and intense. Tracers filled the air around him like angry hornets. He jinked left, then right, never holding a straight line long enough for gunners to lead him properly. The Hellcat shuddered under more impacts, metal tearing somewhere in the fuselage. Stout came in from a different angle, targeting the bombers on the southern end of the field. His remaining ammunition hammered into the aircraft, shredding control surfaces, puncturing fuel tanks. He walked his fire across a fuel truck. The truck exploded with enough force to flip a nearby bomber onto its back. The secondary explosions started immediately. Burning fuel from the truck spread to stacked ammunition crates. The crates detonated in a rapid series of blasts. The bomber's own ordnance cooked off, tearing the aircraft apart from within. Within moments, the southern row was burning as fiercely as the northern. Stout's guns fell silent, empty. He had fired every round. The Hellcat felt sluggish as he pulled up. Damaged control surfaces made it fight him. More warning lights glowed red on the panel. Something was leaking, leaving a thin trail of smoke. But below him, the entire airfield was an inferno. Every aircraft, every fuel drum, every structure consumed by fire. The smoke column rose thousands of feet, marking the spot like a funeral pyre. Stout pointed the damaged Hellcat toward the ocean. He nursed it back to USS Hornet. The hydraulics were failing, making the controls heavy and unresponsive. Oil pressure was dropping. He was not sure the landing gear would extend. But at least the engine was still running. The flight back felt longer than the attack. Adrenaline faded, replaced by the realization of what he had just done. He had directly disobeyed orders. He had attacked alone against impossible odds. He had risked his life and his aircraft on a snap judgment. He had also just destroyed 40 enemy aircraft in 8 minutes. Stout raised USS Hornet on the radio. He reported battle damage, requested priority landing. The carrier turned into the wind. The landing signal officer brought him aboard despite the damaged hydraulics and smoking engine. As Stout climbed out of the cockpit, ground crews swarmed the Hellcat, counting holes. Over 30 hits, 20mm rounds had torn through the tail. 50 caliber holes riddled the fuselage. One round had passed within inches of the cockpit. Another had nicked the oil cooler. The hydraulic lines were shredded. The aircraft would require weeks of repairs, but it had brought him home. The squadron commander met Stout on the deck. He wanted to know what the hell had happened over Peleliu. Stout's report was simple. The airfield was not abandoned. It was packed with aircraft preparing to attack the invasion fleet. He had destroyed them, all of them. 40 aircraft gone. 8 minutes start to finish. The officer stared at him. The intelligence officer asked him to repeat the number. 40 aircraft destroyed by one pilot in a single aircraft. That seemed impossible. Reconnaissance photos confirmed it the next day. The northern airfield at Peleliu was completely destroyed. Not a single aircraft remained operational. Aerial photos showed the burned-out hulks of exactly 40 Japanese planes scattered across a blackened tarmac. Fuel dumps were craters. Structures were rubble. Intelligence officers revised their assessment of Japanese air strength on Peleliu. Instead of facing 40 aircraft on D-Day, The Marines would hit the beaches with complete air superiority. The Japanese air threat had been eliminated by one pilot who had refused to follow orders. The physical toll on Stout was minimal. Bruised ribs from the G-forces, ringing ears from the gunfire and explosions, exhaustion from the adrenaline crash, but he was alive, unhurt. The psychological toll was different. Stout had killed men, Japanese pilots and ground crews who were simply doing their jobs, preparing their aircraft, following their own orders. They had died in the fires he started. War justified these killings. They were enemy combatants. They would have killed American Marines if given the chance. Stout understood this intellectually, but understanding did not make it easier. He did not sleep well for weeks after the attack. When he did sleep, he dreamed of the airfield burning, the ground crews running, the explosions spreading from aircraft to aircraft. But he also thought about the Marines who would land on Peleliu, the men who would not die in their landing craft because 40 enemy aircraft no longer existed. The calculations were brutal but clear. His 8 minutes of violence had saved hundreds of lives. The Navy awarded Stout the Navy Cross on October 2nd, 1944. The citation praised his extraordinary heroism and aggressive fighting spirit in attacking superior enemy forces alone. His decision to engage had directly saved American lives. But the award came with an unspoken caveat. Do not make this a habit. Reconnaissance pilots were not supposed to attack fortified airfields alone. Stout had succeeded this time. Next time, he might not be so lucky. Stout understood. He flew 14 more combat missions before the war ended. He followed orders on everyone. He never again attacked on his own initiative. The Peleliu mission remained unique in his service record. The Battle of Peleliu that followed Stout's attack was brutal regardless. The 1st Marine Division landed on September 15, 1944. They immediately faced some of the most intense fighting in the Pacific. Japanese forces had fortified the island's coral ridges and caves. Every position was a deadly stronghold. The battle lasted over 2 months. It cost nearly 2,000 American lives. Over 10,000 were wounded. The Japanese garrison fought almost to the last man. Only 202 of the original 11,000 defenders surrendered. Yet without Stout's attack, the casualties would have been far worse. Those 40 Japanese aircraft would have attacked during the vulnerable first hours of the invasion, when Marines were packed in landing craft and transport ships. Air attacks on amphibious assaults were devastating because the troops could not take cover or maneuver. Military historians later calculated that Stout's solo attack probably saved between 500 and 1,000 Marine lives in the first day alone. His 8 minutes of combat had accomplished what a full squadron of bombers might have achieved. And he had done it at exactly the critical moment before the Japanese could disperse their aircraft. Colonel Kunio Nakagawa commanded the Japanese defense of Peleliu. His battle plan assumed air support from the northern airfield. When that support never materialized, he adjusted his tactics. But the loss of 40 aircraft weakened Japanese capabilities significantly. Nakagawa never knew why the aircraft failed to launch. He died in the final days of the battle, killed in his command post deep in the Immerbergul caves. His staff burned his body to prevent American forces from desecrating it. Post-war, Japanese military historians studied the Peleliu campaign. They identified the loss of the airfield's strike force as a critical early setback. Without air cover, the garrison fought at a severe disadvantage. American air superiority allowed close air support that devastated Japanese positions throughout the battle. Some Japanese analysts blamed poor airfield security. Why had ground crews allowed an American aircraft to approach undetected? Why had anti-aircraft guns failed to shoot it down before it completed its attack? The truth was simpler. Stout had attacked before anyone realized he was a threat. His speed and surprise had overwhelmed the defenses. By the time anti-aircraft guns opened fire, half the aircraft were already burning. One Japanese officer who survived the battle wrote in his memoir, "We watched the black smoke from the airfield and knew our advantage was gone. The American pilot who destroyed our aircraft destroyed our hope of victory." This was dramatic irony at its finest. The Japanese had concentrated their air assets for maximum effect. That concentration became their vulnerability. Stout had exploited it perfectly. The strategic impact of Stout's attack extended beyond Peleliu. American naval commanders noted that aggressive action by reconnaissance pilots could achieve results beyond traditional missions. Several other pilots attempted similar attacks during subsequent operations. Most failed, some died trying. The difference was timing and target selection. Stout had found exactly the right target at exactly the right moment. His tactical judgment had been flawless. Trying to replicate that success deliberately proved difficult. The Navy did not officially encourage reconnaissance pilots to attack ground targets, but they also did not explicitly forbid it. The standing orders remained: use your judgment. If the tactical situation demands immediate action, take it. But understand you will be held accountable for the results. This principle of commander's intent became central to modern military doctrine. The commander specifies the objective. The tactical operator decides how to achieve it. Rigid adherence to specific instructions often results in missed opportunities. Stout had understood the intent behind his mission: protect the invasion force. When he discovered a threat to that force, he acted. His method was unorthodox. His success vindicated the decision. After the war, Robert Stout returned to California. He worked as a commercial pilot. He married, raised 3 children. He rarely spoke about what he had done over Peleliu. The Navy Cross sat in a drawer, not displayed on any wall. Friends who knew him described a man uncomfortable with attention or praise. When asked about the attack, he downplayed it. I saw planes that needed destroying, so I destroyed them. Any pilot would have done the same. But not every pilot would have. Most would have followed orders, radioed back, let command handle it through proper channels. That bureaucratic approach would have given the Japanese time to scatter their aircraft or launch them. Stout's willingness to disobey orders and trust his own judgment made the difference. His story remained largely unknown outside military aviation circles until historians rediscovered the mission reports decades later. When researchers cross-referenced his Navy Cross citation with Japanese records and aerial photos, they realized the full significance of what he had accomplished. 1 man, 1 aircraft, 8 minutes, 40 enemy planes destroyed. Potentially 1,000 lives saved. Modern fighter pilots study Stout's attack in tactical training courses, not just for the flying skills it demonstrated, but for the decision-making under pressure. The military teaches that sometimes following orders to the letter means missing opportunities that will not come again. The attack also demonstrated perfect target prioritization. Stout did not waste ammunition trying to destroy 40 aircraft individually. He identified the fuel drums as the critical vulnerability and exploited it. 1 bullet in the right place accomplished more than 1,000 bullets in the wrong places. His approach from multiple angles, coming in low and fast to minimize exposure to anti-aircraft fire, showed tactical sophistication beyond simply pointing and shooting. He had analyzed the defenses, planned his attack runs, executed them despite taking damage. And critically, he had known when to stop. After expending his ammunition, he did not loiter trying to assess damage or looking for additional targets. He got out. The mission was accomplished. Staying longer would have been pointless risk. All of these decisions happened in seconds, under fire, with no time for careful deliberation. Stout's training and experience let him make split-second choices that each proved correct. Today, the United States Naval Academy uses Stout's mission as a case study in tactical decision-making. Midshipmen analyze his choices. What information did he have? What were his options? What were the risks? What principle guided his decision? The lesson is consistent. Trust the judgment of people on the ground. Give them authority to act when circumstances demand it. Accept that sometimes the best course of action is the one nobody ordered you to take. The Air Force Weapons School at Nellis Air Force Base teaches similar principles. Instructors present Stout's attack as an example of perfect target assessment and exploitation. Students learn to identify critical vulnerabilities. to act decisively when opportunities present themselves, to balance aggression with survival. These lessons apply beyond military aviation. Business leaders study Stout's decision-making. When do you follow standard procedure? When do you take initiative? How do you assess risk versus reward when time is short and stakes are high? The answers are not simple, but Stout's example provides a framework. Understand the mission's intent. Assess the situation honestly. Trust your training. Act decisively. Accept responsibility for the results. Robert Cowboy Stout died in 2005 at the age of 89. His family finally shared his story publicly. Military historians rushed to preserve the details before they were lost. The mission reports, reconnaissance photos, and Navy Cross citation all confirmed what seemed almost too dramatic to believe. In the final analysis, Stout's attack over Peleliu stands as one of the most successful solo strikes in naval aviation history. No other single pilot destroyed as many enemy aircraft in one mission during World War II. His 8 minutes of combat prevented what would have been a devastating air attack on the Peleliu invasion. The Marines who landed on those beaches never knew that a Navy pilot had disobeyed orders to save their lives. They fought through hell on that coral island, facing Japanese defenders in fortified positions that turned every yard of ground into a battle. But at least they did not face 40 aircraft strafing them as they tried to reach shore. Sometimes the most heroic thing a soldier can do is refuse to follow orders, not out of cowardice or rebellion, but because the situation demands action that rigid adherence to procedure would prevent. Stout understood this instinctively. When confronted with a choice between doing what he was told and doing what needed to be done, he chose the mission over the orders. His legacy lives in every tactical training course that teaches initiative over obedience, adaptation over rigidity, trust in the judgment of people on the ground. The military learned from Stout and pilots like him that sometimes the best course of action is the one nobody ordered you to take. The next time you face a situation where following the rules seems wrong, where rigid procedure conflicts with obvious necessity, remember Cowboy Stout circling over that airfield. He knew what needed to happen. He knew it would cost him if he was wrong, and he did it anyway because the alternative was worse.